Retro gaming, collection or obsession? Hi, we're here today with my cousin Matt to tell us about his retro gaming collection and to find out, is it a collection or obsession? Hi Matt,
Hi.
can you tell me how old were you? Can you tell me how old you were when you started collecting?
I think I started collecting probably in 2010 when I was either 13 or 14, I'd say.
How many games would you say you have and how many systems?
Oh, one thing I'll say, Alex. Would you want me to say why I got into collecting or what got me into it? Because if I just say when I started, then there's.
Okay, yes, what got you interested in game collecting in the first place?
The thing that kind of got me into it is just like a YouTube channel, a guy that just reviewed games. And I just saw he just had this huge collection of games, and I was just really interested in old games, just like learning the history of them, kinda. And uh, I would say I always loved just collecting things, and I loved video games, so it was like a perfect combination to bring them together. And I just started kind of getting some of the games I saw on his videos. I wanted the consoles that he had, and then from there it just kind of grew into anything interesting that I saw.
Now then on to the next question, which I asked before. How many games would you say you have and how many systems?
I would say now, I don't know if it would be the peak of how many I have, because I think I've sold a few, but now I have probably still close to 1,000 games and consoles in total. Probably over 950 games, and then I have probably like 30 consoles, some being like extras or doubles.
What was the first system you bought?
The first system I got collecting was actually I think it was called a Retro Duo, and it was just a system that could play Super Nintendo and Nintendo games, but it was made by a third-party manufacturer in like 2008. So it wasn't an actual real console, but it was just for people who had the games. But after that, it limited me to just Super Nintendo and Nintendo games that I could get for my collection. I eventually got the actual Super Nintendo. So I guess if you want to go with actual console, it'd probably be Super Nintendo. And that was only because there's a specific game that doesn't work on the Retro Duo because it has a special chip in it that it needs the original Super Nintendo hardware to actually use that chip. And so then from there I got a Super Nintendo.
What game did you buy what game was it that you bought it for?
It was Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars.
Do you actually play all the games you own?
Uh, I don't know if I'd even say I play, but I've at least tested them, which means I tried them for at least 5 minutes. Otherwise, they didn't sell me the game that I bought. But I've at least tested all of them. I'd say like played more than 20 minutes would probably be maybe 10% or less.
So then you're just buying it because you're collecting?
You could say that. Some games I buy for different purposes. So some games I would buy just because it was an interesting cover. Some of them had really weird covers that I thought were cool and are kind of relics of the past. Some games are just much rarer than others, and it's much more satisfying having a collection of games that are hard to find and just reflecting and looking at it, uh, rather than just getting random games that don't really have any rarity to them. Some games, obviously, I did buy to play.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that's a lot fewer than the ones I bought to collect for the rarity sake, or just because they were a good deal, or they were included in like a lot of games that I would buy like a garage sale. You know, when you buy someone's old games, you don't just buy one, you buy everything that they have, and then obviously I only bought it for maybe one thing in it, but I have like 10 other things now.
What is your favorite system?
My favorite system is probably going to have to be the Nintendo 64, just because it's the one I remember most vividly playing with friends and family, and it was a system that kind of started me out on gaming, at least on a home console. You know, I also had a Game Boy, but I have more memories with the Nintendo 64.
Do you know how old the Nintendo 64 is?
I believe it was released in 1995 or 6, which is basically when I was born. But you know, I think I played it when I was like 4, because our neighbor they always had like every console, and I think they would just like give us or sell us their old systems when the new ones came out. And yeah, we just ended up with it. So I think I was like 4 or 5 when I first played it in like 1999 or like 2000.
What is your favorite game?
Well, there's 2 types of games, I guess, that I could say for this. It'd be either favorite game, like, you know, rarity, or just cool thing to have in my collection. Favorite game to actually play of like all time. I would say my favorite game that I've collected for the sake of collecting, not even playing, is probably a game called Aero Fighters. It's on Super Nintendo, and I found it at a pawn shop, which is another reason why it's one of my favorite games in my collection. Is the pawn shop, usually they were pretty overpriced with stuff they had, but I was digging through all their games. They just had them like on a bottom shelf in a glass case, just like, you know, hidden behind a bunch of stuff, and it was just fun digging through it and seeing that game. You know, it's had like a $35 price tag on it at the time, and I believe I was like 16 or 17, and $35 is a lot at that age. Like, I mean, brand new games, I guess, are $60, and you don't get those too often. But as a collector, buying so many games, you don't want to pay $35 each, otherwise that price gets insane. You can't afford that, especially me as a 17-year-old. And that game, I didn't actually buy it, but I actually went to a restaurant, had a collecting app, and saw the image of the game and saw the rarity level, and I was like, I have to go back and get that game. And that game ends nowadays. The prices have gotten insane, but even at the time, it was a great deal. It was, I mean, I think it was worth more than 5 times that, and I have not seen a single copy of that game since in person. You know, I've gone to many video game stores, and I never see that game, and you know, I know the rarity. And then game that I love playing, that's just like my favorite of all time, is probably like Paper Mario: 1,000 Year Door on GameCube.
Is there a game you're playing right now?
Now I would say I don't really play too many like console games, so games that I could collect. Play more PC now, sometimes Switch, sometimes PS4, but right now I guess I'm just playing Psychonauts 2, because that just released.
Now, I think you answered this question already in another question, but I'm just going to ask you again. Which one game is the most valuable?
I did, so that's probably the answer now. I haven't checked all the prices lately, but I'm pretty sure that game has stayed as my most valuable.
Where do you buy these games, and are they hard to find?
Yeah, That's a good question because that's actually a reason why I've kind of, I wouldn't say completely gotten out of it, but just almost haven't bought very many games lately. Uh, I used to go to thrift stores, pawn shops, just like consignment stores, yard sales, obviously video game stores. Sometimes I would go on like eBay or Craigslist. A lot of those sources have almost completely just dried up. Either that or everyone, has access to the internet. People are obsessively just buying things to resell with collectibles. So that has basically made the market explode in terms of like just buying and selling, people going to stores, buying everything with no intention to even collect it or play it, and just selling it online. So all the good deals that would be there's nothing anymore. So a lot of places have just stopped selling them. Obviously we have a video game store in Mankato that doesn't exist anymore. There's a lot of places like that just don't sell games anymore. They went out of business. And so now I would say the only places I really get it are if I'm like, I still go to thrift stores, not for video games specifically, but if I see something there, maybe I'll get it, or not so much pawn shops anymore, or even video game stores. So I guess also not like on eBay, but maybe on like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Those are probably the only places I'd check anymore.
Is there a game that you thought, this is the dumbest game ever?
There's a lot of games that are terrible. There's a ton of really old like Atari games that were just made because people were obsessively buying video games for the Atari 2600, and anyone could make a game. There's like a Purina Dog Chow game. Like Purina you wouldn't think of them as making a video game. They made it on their own. It's not like they licensed their dog food to like Activision or someone. They themselves made a game. So stuff like that is pretty dumb. Just like random games. There's games that are dumb just because of like their cover or their concept. Games that are just bad today that have no excuse being bad with game development. I don't know if there's any specific game besides just like the Purina Dog Chow one I mentioned. There's a ton of bad games that I could go over, but yeah.
Now that you're older, have a career, do you have any regrets? Will you keep your collection?
I don't regret it for a second, because even though I'm not too much into it anymore, I can still look back at all the enjoyment and entertainment I got just from like hunting for video games out in the wild, of going to thrift stores or pawn shops with my dad, driving around the cities, going to multiple locations at one stop, like one drive up to the cities. I would anywhere I went or traveled to with my parents, it was always on my mind, and it was a way for me to have entertainment. So whether I was traveling or I was at home, obviously with the games, it brought me it was like a huge part of my life, huge hobby.
Okay, do you do any collections of anything else aside from retro video games?
Well, even before video games, I had that, gotta have them all kind of thing, or like I wanted a lot of something I was into. And I would say when I was younger, it would be toys, specific toys that I'd have. I'd want a bunch of them, Legos or like Imaginext toys or Bionicles or wrestling figures. I wanted a ton. I wanted the whole roster, all the ones available. And now I'd say collecting wise, I have like a board game collection now. It's not, I don't collect for collecting's sake that way, because board games don't really, I'm not really that into them in terms of collecting. I actually play them, or try to. Sometimes it's harder with that. Video games you can play by yourself. Board games, some of them you can, but most of them you can't. And then I would say I've kind of gotten a little into just kind of buying and collecting discs for disc golf, just because that's just a fun activity I've gotten into in the last year and a half. And I can also do like little art with them. I can do like dyeing and make like designs with them. So
I'm beginning to see a pattern. My final question, is this a collection or an obsession?
I would say it used to be an obsession. The video game collecting was an obsession for sure. But I always tried to try to control myself. I would never, ever buy a game for what it was worth online. I would always try to pay as little as possible. I would see hundreds of games I wanted, and I would pass them up, never buy them because, I don't have that much money. I can always wait another day, and I can just keep going at it another. Like I don't have to grow my collection. So in that way, I had control, and it wasn't, like an addiction or maybe obsession. I don't know if I'm confusing those two words, but there are times where it's like I just am always, trying to look at things at least. It takes up a lot of time to scour the internet or look at things like for like the disc golf thing that I'm into right now. I don't know if I'd say collecting, but I'm just always on the lookout for discs. So it consumes a lot of time. So in that way, it could be an obsession, but I still try to have some self-control.
Thanks, Matt. It sounds like it's all about the find for the best deal.